The stars burned cold and distant above the planet Arcturus 7. Princess Nari stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the battle unfold through the main viewing screen. Red lights flashed across the control panels. The ship shook as enemy fire struck the shields. All around her, crew members worked at their stations, their blue skin gleaming under the emergency lighting. Nari was Veltir, one of the oldest and most powerful alien races in the galaxy. Her people had built an empire that stretched across dozens of star systems. They were warriors, scientists, and explorers. They believed themselves superior to almost every other species they had encountered. And for thousands of years that belief had been proven true. But today that superiority was being tested. The Cormath Dominion had launched a massive attack. Their ships filled the space around Arcturus 7 like a swarm of angry insects. The Cormath were brutal and relentless. They wanted this planet for its resources, and they would destroy anyone who stood in their way. Commander Taeyang turned to Nari, his face tight with worry. He was her second in command and had served under her for 5 years. She trusted him completely. "Princess, our shields are down to 40%. 3 of our escort ships have been destroyed. We need to retreat." Nari clenched her fists. She hated the idea of running. Her father, King Day, had taught her that Velthir warriors never showed weakness. But she also knew that losing this ship would mean losing hundreds of loyal crew members. She could not let that happen. "All ships fall back to position 7, she commanded. Her voice was steady and strong. "Prepare for tactical retreat." The crew obeyed immediately. The flagship began to turn, its massive engines glowing brighter as it built up speed. The other Velthir ships in her squadron followed. But the Cormath were not going to let them escape so easily. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the ship. Nari grabbed the edge of a console to keep from falling. Sparks flew from damaged equipment. The lights flickered and went out for a moment before the backup systems kicked in. "Direct hit to the engine core," someone shouted. "We're losing power." Nari looked at the damage reports flooding her screen. It was worse than she had feared. The ship was dying. They had minutes at most before the core overloaded completely. "All hands abandon ship," she ordered.
"Get to the escape pods now."
The crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this moment, though no one had ever wanted it to come. Taeyang grabbed Nari's arm. "Princess, you must go. I will make sure everyone gets out. I'm not leaving until..." Another explosion cut her off. This one was much closer. The blast threw Nari backward. Her head struck something hard and pain exploded behind her eyes. She heard Taeyang shouting, but his voice sounded far away. Strong hands lifted her up. Through blurred vision, she saw Taeyang carrying her toward an escape pod. Other crew members were already sealed inside their own pods, launching away from the dying ship. Taeyang placed her in the pod and activated the launch sequence. "Forgive me, Princess," he said. Then the door sealed shut. Nari tried to protest, but the pod was already launching. She pressed her hand against the window, watching as Taeyang ran back into the ship. He was going to make sure everyone else got out, even if it cost him his life. The escape pod shot away from the flagship. Nari watched helplessly as her ship exploded in a ball of white fire. The blast wave caught her pod, sending it spinning wildly through space. Alarms screamed inside the tiny capsule. Warning lights flashed red. A large piece of debris slammed into the pod. The impact cracked the outer hull. Air began to hiss out through the damage. The pod's computer tried to seal the breach, but it was too severe. Life support was failing. Nari fought to stay conscious. She tried to send a distress signal, but the communications array had been destroyed in the collision. The pod was tumbling now, completely out of control. Through the window, she could see a small moon in the distance, growing larger as the pod fell toward it. She had no way to control her descent, no way to call for help. The pod was going to crash, and there was nothing she could do about it. Nari closed her eyes and thought of her father. King Day was the ruler of the Velthir Empire, loved and respected by billions. He had lost her mother to illness many years ago. Now he was going to lose his only daughter to this war. She hoped he would forgive her for failing. The pod hit the moon's surface hard. Metal screamed as it tore apart. Nari was thrown against the restraints. Everything went black. Far away on the Velthir homeworld, King Day received the report. His daughter's flagship had been destroyed. All hands were lost. There were no survivors. The king stood alone in his private chambers, staring out at the city below. Millions of lights twinkled in the darkness. Each one represented a citizen of his empire. He had sworn to protect them all, but he had failed to protect the one person who mattered most. Tears ran down his blue face. He did not try to stop them. Let them fall. Let the world see that even a king could grieve. The next day, the entire Velthir Empire mourned. Flags were lowered. Public ceremonies were held. Nari had been more than just a princess. She had been a symbol of hope, a warrior who fought alongside her people rather than hiding behind palace walls. And now she was gone. On the unnamed moon where her pod had crashed, Nari lay unconscious in the wreckage. The life support system flickered weakly, barely keeping her alive. The moon was cold and barren, far from any major shipping lanes. No one would ever think to look for her here, but the moon was not completely empty. On the far side, nestled in a crater, sat a small mining station. It was old and battered, held together with patches and repairs. Only one person lived there, a human salvager who had come to this forgotten place to escape the noise and chaos of civilized space. His name was Jiho, and he was about to detect an energy signature that would change everything. Jiho sat in front of his monitoring station, drinking cold coffee from a metal cup. The liquid tasted terrible, but he had run out of fresh supplies 3 weeks ago. The next supply ship would not arrive for another month. Until then, he would have to make do with what he had. He did not mind the isolation. In fact, he preferred it. Out here on this forgotten moon, no one bothered him. No one asked questions. He could work in peace, salvaging old mining equipment and selling it to traders who passed through the sector. It was not a glamorous life, but it was his. The monitoring system beeped. Jiho frowned and set down his cup. The sensors rarely picked up anything interesting. Usually it was just space debris or the occasional asteroid passing by. But this reading was different. The screen showed an energy signature on the other side of the moon. Something had crashed there recently. The power reading suggested advanced technology, far more sophisticated than anything Jiho had in his station. He leaned closer to the screen. Could be valuable salvage, he thought. Or it could be dangerous. There was a war going on in nearby sectors. He had heard reports of battles between alien races he could barely pronounce. Humans were not involved in that war. Most alien races barely noticed humanity at all. Humans were seen as unremarkable, not particularly strong, not especially smart, just average in almost every way. Jiho had learned to be okay with that. Being unremarkable meant being safe. No one threatened Earth. No one tried to conquer human colonies. They simply were not worth the effort. But this crash site worried him. What if it was a military vessel? What if whoever crashed there was still alive? Jiho grabbed his jacket and equipment belt. He had to check it out. If someone was injured, he could not just leave them to die. That was not who he was. The rover journey took 2 hours. The moon's surface was rough and covered with craters. Jiho had traveled these paths many times, but he never got used to how empty everything felt. No plants, no animals, just rock and dust and silence. When he reached the crash site, his breath caught in his throat. The escape pod was unlike anything he had ever seen. Even damaged and torn apart, it was clearly the work of a highly advanced civilization. Strange symbols covered the hull. The metal itself seemed to shimmer with a faint blue glow. Jiho approached carefully. The pod was split open, exposing the interior. He shined his flashlight inside and froze. There was someone in there. The alien was tall, with blue skin and features that were both beautiful and strange. She wore armor that had been badly damaged in the crash. Blood seeped from a wound on her head. Her breathing was shallow and weak. Jiho checked the life support system still flickering inside the pod. The readings were bad. She had maybe an hour left, probably less. He had no medical training for alien biology. He barely knew how to treat human injuries, but he could not just leave her here. He climbed into the pod and carefully examined her armor. There were emergency release switches on the sides. He pressed them and the armor plates loosened. Slowly, gently, he removed the damaged sections. Underneath, she wore a black bodysuit that seemed to regulate her temperature. The head wound was deep. Jiho pulled out his emergency medical kit. It was designed for humans, but he hoped the basics would work. He cleaned the wound as best he could and wrapped it with bandages. His hands shook as he worked. This was completely outside his expertise. Next came the hard part. He had to get her back to his station. The rover had not been designed to carry passengers, especially not unconscious ones. Jiho rigged up a makeshift stretcher using cargo netting and support poles. The journey back was nerve-wracking. Every bump made him worried that he was making her injuries worse. He drove as carefully as he could while still moving fast enough to matter. The clock was ticking. When he finally got her into his station, Jiho set up the spare room as a medical bay. He had a basic scanner that could read vital signs. According to the device, her heart rate was too slow, and her body temperature was dropping. Not good signs. He wrapped her in thermal blankets and set up an IV drip with electrolyte solution. It might not be perfect for her biology, but it was better than nothing. Then he started researching. Jiho spent hours searching through databases on his computer. He found references to the Velthir Empire. They were one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Warriors and conquerors who had built an empire spanning dozens of star systems, and he had one of them dying in his spare room. The database had limited medical information. Velthir biology was similar to human in some ways but different in others. Their blood carried oxygen differently. Their immune systems were more aggressive. They needed different nutrients. Jiho did what he could. He adjusted the temperature in the room. He found supplements in his supplies that might help. He monitored her constantly, checking her vitals every few minutes. 3 days passed. The alien woman remained unconscious. Jiho barely slept. He survived on coffee and worry. Several times he thought he was going to lose her. Her breathing would get weaker. Her temperature would drop, and he would have to scramble to find a solution. On the 4th day, she opened her eyes. Jiho was checking her bandages when he noticed her staring at him. Her eyes were a bright silver color, unlike anything he had ever seen. They were filled with confusion and fear. She tried to sit up, but the movement made her wince in pain. Jiho gently pressed her shoulder. "Easy," he said softly. "You're safe. You were in a crash. I found you and brought you here." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she spoke in a language he did not understand. Her voice was weak but had a musical quality to it. Jiho shook his head. "I don't understand." "Do you speak Standard?" She blinked, then switched to Standard, the common trade language used across the galaxy. Where am I?" "You're on a mining moon. Edge of human space. My name is Jiho. I found your escape pod 4 days ago." Her eyes widened. 4 days? My ship. The battle. She tried to sit up again more urgently this time. "Please, you need to rest," Jiho said. "You were badly injured. You're lucky to be alive." Nari looked around the small room. It was nothing like the medical facilities on Velthir ships. The equipment was old and basic. The walls were patched with mismatched materials. But she was alive. This strange human had saved her life. "You are human," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "Why did you help me?" Jiho looked surprised by the question. "Because you needed help. What else would I do?" Nari did not know how to respond to that. In her world, everything had a reason. People acted based on duty, honor, or advantage, but this human seemed to have helped her simply because it was the right thing to do. "I am Princess Nari of the Velthir Empire," she said formally. Jiho's expression did not change. "Nice to meet you, Nari. Are you hungry? I have some soup." 2 weeks passed. Nari's physical wounds healed slowly but steadily. Jiho gave her his bed while he slept on a chair in the main room. He shared his food even though supplies were limited. He never complained, never asked for anything in return. It confused her. Velthir society was built on hierarchy and honor. Everyone had a place. Everyone knew their duty. But Jiho seemed to operate on completely different principles. He helped because helping felt right. He shared because he had enough. He worked hard not for glory, but simply because the work needed to be done. Once she was strong enough to walk, Nari explored the station. It was small and cramped, nothing like the grand vessels she had commanded. But it was clean and organized. Everything had its place. The equipment was old but well maintained. She found Jiho in the workshop, bent over a complex piece of machinery. He was trying to repair her damaged armor. The sophisticated Velthir technology was far beyond anything he had worked with before, but he studied it carefully, taking notes and running tests. "You don't have to do that," Nari said. Jiho looked up and smiled. "I know, but you'll need it eventually, right? Might as well try to fix what I can. That armor uses quantum-level circuitry. Human technology is centuries away from understanding it. Maybe, Jiho agreed. But I've fixed things before that I didn't fully understand. Sometimes you just have to be patient and pay attention. Nari watched him work for a while. His hands moved with practiced skill. When something did not make sense, he would pause and think, trying different approaches until he found one that worked. It was not sophisticated. It was not elegant. But it was effective. My father believes I am dead, she said quietly. Jiho set down his tools. I'm sorry. Can we send him a message? The communications array on my pod was destroyed. Your station's transmitter doesn't have enough range to reach Veltir space. Then we'll build a stronger one. She stared at him. Do you know how complex deep space communications are? No, Jiho admitted. But I can learn. And you can teach me. So they worked together. Nari explained the principles of Veltir communication technology. Jiho figured out how to build approximations using human equipment and salvaged parts. It was slow and frustrating. They argued sometimes when their different approaches clashed. But gradually they made progress. During breaks they would talk. Nari told him about the Veltir Empire, about her father the king, about the war with the Kormath, about her crew and Commander Taeyang, who had saved her life at the cost of his own. Jiho listened without judgment. He asked questions not to challenge but to understand. And when she cried for the first time since the crash, mourning her lost crew members, he simply sat beside her and offered quiet comfort. In return, Jiho told her about Earth, about humanity's slow expansion into space, about how most alien races viewed humans as unremarkable. He spoke without bitterness, as if it was simply a fact of life. Doesn't it bother you? Nari asked. Being seen as inferior? Jiho shrugged. We're not inferior, just different. We might not have the best technology or the strongest warriors, but we survive, we adapt. We help each other. That counts for something. Nari thought about that. In Veltir culture, strength was everything. Military power, technological advancement, individual achievement. The idea that simply helping each other could be valuable seemed strange to her. But as she watched Jiho work, day after day, never giving up even when things seemed impossible, she began to understand. One evening, Nari found a small injured creature outside the station. It looked like a cross between a bird and a lizard, native to the moon's few scattered valleys. Its wing was broken. She brought it inside. Jiho immediately set aside his work to help. He made a splint from spare materials and created a small habitat where the creature could recover. He fed it by hand and checked on it regularly. Why do you care about this animal? Nari asked. It serves no purpose. Jiho looked at her with surprise. Does everything need a purpose? It's alive. It's suffering. I can help, so I should. This simple statement affected Nari more than she wanted to admit. In her world, actions required justification. Strategic value, honor, duty. But Jiho's compassion needed no justification. It simply was. 6 weeks after the crash, disaster struck. A massive solar storm approached the moon. Jiho's warning systems detected it just in time. The radiation would be intense enough to damage the station's systems and potentially kill them both. They had only hours to prepare. Jiho ran calculations while Nari checked the station's shield generators. The shields were designed to protect against minor radiation, not a storm of this magnitude. They would fail within minutes. We need to reinforce them, Nari said. Your power systems can't handle it, but if we reroute energy from my armor's power core, it might work. That will drain your armor completely, Jiho pointed out. You won't be able to recharge it. Then we find another solution later. Right now we need to survive. They worked frantically. Jiho integrated the alien power core into his station's systems, while Nari reconfigured the shield generators. It was dangerous work. One mistake could cause the entire power system to explode, but they trusted each other. Nari's combat training helped her stay calm under pressure. Jiho's engineering expertise let him improvise solutions on the spot. They moved like a team that had worked together for years, not weeks. The storm hit just as they finished. The station shook violently. Outside, the sky turned a sickly green as radiation bombarded the moon's surface. Alarms screamed. Power fluctuated wildly. Jiho monitored the shields. Nari watched the power levels. They stood side by side, ready to make adjustments if needed. The storm lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of constant vigilance and minor repairs. 6 hours of uncertainty. But when it finally passed, the shields were still holding. The station was intact, They had survived. Nari sat down heavily, exhausted but alive. Jiho collapsed beside her. For a moment they just breathed, grateful to still be breathing. "Thank you," Nari said. "I could not have done that alone." "Neither could I," Jiho replied. "We made a good team." Nari looked at this human who had saved her life not once but multiple times now. This being that her culture would have dismissed as weak and insignificant. And she realized that humans might not be impressive by Velthur standards, but maybe Velthur standards were wrong. The alarm woke them both in the middle of the night cycle. Jiho was on his feet instantly, rushing to the monitoring station. Nari followed close behind, still pulling on her damaged armor. "What is it?" she asked. Jiho's face was pale. "Ships. 3 of them. Military configuration. They're scanning the moon." Nari leaned over the display. Her blood ran cold. She recognized those ship signatures. "Cormath. They must have detected energy readings from the repairs we made. Will they attack?" "If they think this is a Velthir military installation, yes. Immediately." She studied the readings. "They're deploying a strike team. 12 soldiers. They'll be here in less than an hour." Jiho ran his hand through his hair. "Can we fight them?" Nari looked at her damaged armor, then at Jiho's mining equipment. "No. Cormath soldiers are heavily armed and trained for assault operations. We have no weapons, no support. We would be dead in minutes." "Then we run?" "Where?" "The rover is too slow. They would catch us easily." Jiho stared at the screen, thinking hard. His mind raced through options, discarding each one as fast as it came. Then something occurred to him. Something crazy. "What if we don't fight or run?" he said slowly. "What if we trap them?" Nari frowned. "Trap them how?" "This moon is geologically unstable. That's why mining operations were abandoned here. The crust is riddled with empty pockets and weak points. I've mapped most of them to avoid accidents." "You want to cause a collapse?" "More than that. I have mining charges, electromagnetic pulse generators, equipment that can manipulate the environment. If we lure them to the right location and trigger everything at the right moment." Nari understood immediately. "We could disable their ships and equipment without firing a shot, but the timing would have to be perfect, and we would need to make them come to us. Can you do that?" She thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes. If I broadcast a distress signal in Velthir military code, they'll converge on the source. They'll want to capture or kill whoever is sending it." They spent the next 40 minutes preparing. Jiho loaded mining charges into the rover along with every piece of equipment that could be useful. Nari studied the geological maps and helped him identify the best location for their trap. They chose a wide crater about 2 kilometers from the station. Beneath it lay a massive hollow chamber in the moon's crust. The ceiling of that chamber was already weak. With the right amount of pressure, it would collapse. Jiho placed mining charges at strategic points around the crater's edge. He buried them just beneath the surface so the Cormath would not see them. Then he set up electromagnetic pulse generators at the cardinal points. These would disable any electronic equipment in range when activated. Nari climbed to a ridge overlooking the crater. From here she could broadcast the distress signal and observe the entire battlefield. She also had a clear line of sight to Jiho's position. "Ready?" Jiho asked through the communicator. "Ready," Nari confirmed. She activated the signal. The response was immediate. All 3 Cormath ships changed course, heading straight for their position. Within minutes, the strike team landed at the crater's edge. 12 heavily armed soldiers in powered armor emerged from their transport. The Cormath were large and muscular, with thick gray skin and 4 arms. Each soldier carried weapons powerful enough to tear through reinforced walls. Their armor bristled with sensors and targeting systems. They spread out in a standard assault formation, moving toward Nari's position. She waited until they were all inside the crater before broadcasting again. The signal drew them further in, toward the center where the ground was weakest. The Cormath commander barked orders in their harsh language. The soldiers advanced cautiously, weapons raised. They were expecting a fight. They were expecting Velthir warriors with advanced technology. What they got instead was Jiho's signal. The electromagnetic pulse hit them first. Every electronic system within the crater died instantly. Armor displays went dark. Weapons stopped functioning. Communication devices fell silent. The Cormath suddenly found themselves blind and defenseless. Before they could react, the mining charges detonated. The explosions were carefully calibrated. Not strong enough to kill, but powerful enough to destabilize the ground. Cracks spread across the crater floor. The ceiling of the hollow chamber beneath gave way. The entire crater floor dropped 6 meters in a cloud of dust and debris. The Cormath soldiers tumbled into the depression, their heavy armor making it impossible to recover quickly. Their transport vehicle tilted at a dangerous angle, trapped in the collapsed terrain. But Jiho and Nari were not done. Jiho activated the mining lasers he had positioned around the crater. These were designed to cut through rock, not fight battles. But directed at the Cormath ships hovering above, they created a different problem. The lasers struck the ship's sensor arrays, blinding them. Meanwhile, Nari used a portable projector to create false energy signatures all around the crater. It made it appear as if dozens of Veltir soldiers were surrounding the Cormath position. The enemy soldiers, already disoriented and blind, panicked. Their commander tried to restore order, but without communications, it was impossible. The soldiers stumbled around in the collapsed crater, trying to regroup while false targets appeared and disappeared around them. The ships above attempted to provide support, but with their sensors damaged, they could not risk firing into the crater. They might hit their own troops, and the mining lasers continued to harass them, forcing them to maintain distance. After 30 minutes of chaos, the Cormath commander made the only logical decision. He ordered a retreat. The soldiers scrambled back to their transport, abandoning equipment in their haste. The vehicle struggled out of the collapsed terrain and lifted off awkwardly. The 3 ships regrouped and fled the moon at full speed. They had expected an easy target. Instead, they had been defeated by an enemy they never even saw. Jiho and Nari met back at the station. They were exhausted and covered in dust, but alive. They had won. "I cannot believe that worked," Nari said, collapsing into a chair. Jiho laughed, the sound tinged with relief and disbelief. "Neither can I, honestly. I've never fought a battle before." "That was not a battle," Nari said. "That was something else entirely. You used their expectations against them, made them see threats that did not exist, turned the environment itself into a weapon. It was brilliant." "It was just problem solving," Jiho replied modestly. "We had limited resources, so we had to be creative." Nari looked at him with new respect. Veltir military academies taught strategy and tactics. They trained warriors to be strong and decisive. But they did not teach this kind of thinking, this ability to see possibilities where others saw only limitations. "Your people," she said slowly. "Humans. You really are remarkable, aren't you?" Jiho shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "We just do what we need to do to survive." But Nari understood now. That was exactly what made them remarkable. Humans did not have superior strength or advanced technology, but they had something else. Something that might be even more valuable. They had the ability to adapt, to overcome, to find ways forward even when the path seemed impossible. And perhaps, she thought, that was the most powerful weapon of all. 3 days after the Cormath attack, the communications array was finally complete. Jiho and Nari had worked around the clock to finish it. Now it sat on the roof of the station, a strange hybrid of Veltir technology and human engineering. Nari stood at the control panel, her hand hovering over the activation switch. She had dreamed of this moment for weeks, the chance to contact her people, to let her father know she was alive. But now that it was here, she felt strangely reluctant. "Something wrong?" Jiho asked. "No, She paused. "Everything will change once I send this signal." Jiho nodded. He understood. For the past weeks, this small station had been their entire world. Just the 2 of them working together, surviving together. Soon that would end. "Your father needs to know you're alive," he said gently. Nari took a deep breath and activated the array. The signal transmitted into space, carrying her identification codes and location. Now they just had to wait. They did not have to wait long. Within 6 hours, a Veltir patrol fleet arrived. 5 warships appeared in orbit around the moon, their weapon systems active and scanning for threats. A message came through almost immediately. "This is General Quan of the Velthir Imperial Fleet. Identify yourself." Nari responded with her voice code. There was a long moment of silence. When Quan spoke again, his voice shook with emotion. "Princess Nari, is it really you?" "It is, old friend. By the stars. We thought you were dead. The entire Empire mourns? Your father." Quan's voice broke. "How did you survive?" "My escape pod crashed on this moon. A human found me and saved my life." Another pause. "A human? Are you certain?" Nari glanced at Jiho, who was watching the conversation with growing discomfort. "Yes, his name is Jiho. He has been taking care of me for weeks. Without him, I would have died." "I see." Quan's tone had changed, becoming more formal. "We are deploying a rescue shuttle. Please stand by." The shuttle landed an hour later. General Quan emerged first, followed by a medical team and armed guards. Quan was an imposing figure, tall even by Velthir standards, with ceremonial armor that marked his rank. He approached Nari with tears in his eyes and embraced her carefully. "Little warrior."
"I never thought I would see you again. I am harder to kill than you think," Nari replied with a small smile. Quan finally noticed Jiho standing awkwardly near the station entrance.
The general's expression became carefully neutral. He walked over and looked down at the human. "You are the one who aided the princess?" "Yes, sir," Jiho replied. "I'm Jiho. I run this mining station." Quan studied him for a long moment. "The Empire is grateful for your assistance. You will be compensated appropriately." The words were polite but dismissive. Jiho heard the unspoken message clearly. "Your job is done. You can go back to your insignificant life now." "General," Nari said firmly, "Jiho did more than assist me. He saved my life multiple times. He shared his food even when supplies were limited. He repaired my armor using technology he had never seen before. When Kormath soldiers attacked, we fought them off together." Quan raised an eyebrow. "Kormath here?" "A strike team. 12 soldiers. We defeated them without weapons, using only the mining equipment and the moon's unstable geology." The general looked skeptical. "You defeated a Kormath strike team?" "The 2 of you?" "Yes." Nari's voice was steady and confident. "Jiho created a trap that disabled their equipment and forced them to retreat. It was the most innovative tactical thinking I have ever witnessed." Quan glanced at Jiho with new interest, though doubt remained in his eyes. It was hard to believe that this small, unimpressive human could have accomplished such things. "Princess, we should return to the fleet," he said. "Your father is desperate to see you. We have a direct communication link prepared." "I will come," Nari agreed. "But Jiho comes with us," Quan frowned. "That is not necessary. We can arrange compensation and transport back to human space." "He comes with us," Nari repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I owe him my life. The least I can do is bring him to meet my father." Jiho stepped forward. "Princess, you don't have to do this. I'm just a salvager. I don't belong in your world." "You belong wherever I say you belong," Nari said. "And right now, that is with me." The flight to the Velthir homeworld took 3 days. Jiho spent most of that time in the guest quarters Nari had insisted he be given. The quarters were larger than his entire station. Everything was made of materials he could not identify. The technology was so advanced it seemed like magic. He felt completely out of place. Nari visited him often during the journey. She told him about her home world, about the royal court, about what to expect. She tried to prepare him, but Jiho knew that nothing could really prepare him for this. "My father can be intimidating," Nari admitted, "but he is fair. Once he understands what you did for me, he will welcome you." "And the rest of your people?" Nari hesitated. "Many Velthir believe we are superior to other species. They will not understand how a human could have succeeded where they believe only Velthir could. You may face skepticism." "You mean they'll think I'm weak and useless," Jiho said bluntly. "Some will, but you will prove them wrong. Just as you proved me wrong." When they finally arrived at the Velthir homeworld, Jiho stood at the observation window and stared in awe. The planet was beautiful beyond words. Crystal towers rose from vast cities. Orbital platforms surrounded the world like rings. Ships came and went in perfectly coordinated patterns. It was a civilization at its peak, and Jiho was about to walk into its royal court wearing borrowed clothes and carrying nothing but his own inadequacy. Nari came to stand beside him. Nervous? Terrified, he admitted. She placed a hand on his shoulder. You survived a ship crash, a solar storm, and a Kormath attack. You can survive this too. Those things were simple, Jiho replied. I knew what to do. Here I have no idea. Then do what you always do, Nari said. Be yourself. Be honest, be kind. That is more than enough. Jiho was not sure he believed her, but he had come this far. He could not turn back now. The ship descended toward the royal palace and Jiho prepared to meet. The throne room was the most magnificent space Jiho had ever seen. Crystal columns rose 50 meters high, each one glowing with soft blue light. The walls were covered in murals depicting Veltir history, thousands of years of conquest and achievement. And at the far end, on a throne that seemed carved from a single piece of midnight stone, sat King Day. The king stood as they entered. He was tall and powerfully built, with the bearing of someone who had never doubted his place in the universe. But his eyes were fixed only on Nari. My daughter, he said. His voice broke on the words. Nari ran to him. Father and daughter embraced, both of them crying openly. The assembled court watched in respectful silence. No one had seen the king show such emotion in years. Jiho stood near the entrance, trying to be invisible. He had never felt so small and out of place. The courtiers were all dressed in elaborate clothing. They moved with grace and confidence, and they were all staring at him with barely concealed confusion. Finally, King Day released Nari and looked toward Jiho. The king's expression shifted from joy to puzzlement. This is the human? He asked. Yes, father. This is Jiho. He saved my life. The king walked down from his throne. He approached Jiho slowly, studying him as one might study an unusual artifact. Jiho forced himself to meet the king's gaze. You are smaller than I expected, King Day said finally. Most humans are, compared to Veltir, Jiho replied honestly. And yet my daughter claims you accomplished remarkable things, that you healed her injuries despite knowing nothing of our biology, that you defeated Kormath soldiers using only mining equipment. I did what I could with what I had, Jiho said. Anyone would have done the same. A voice spoke from the assembled courtiers. Would they? An older Veltir stepped forward. He wore military decorations and carried himself with authority. I am Admiral Sung. I have served the Empire for 40 years, and I find it difficult to believe that a human could achieve what our finest warriors would struggle with. Nari's eyes flashed with anger. Admiral, you question my word? Not your word, Princess, but perhaps your perspective. You were injured and traumatized. It is natural to see your rescuer in the best possible light, but that does not make him exceptional. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the court. Jiho felt his face grow hot. He had known this would happen, known that they would doubt, known that to them he was just a weak, insignificant human who had gotten lucky. King Day raised a hand for silence. Admiral Sung makes a fair point. We cannot simply accept remarkable claims without evidence. However, we also cannot dismiss what my daughter has experienced. He turned to Jiho. Human, are you willing to prove your worth? Father, this is not necessary, Nari protested. I think it is, the king replied gently. Not because I doubt you, daughter, but because others do. If this human truly possesses the qualities you describe, then let him demonstrate them. It is the Veltir way. Jiho looked at Nari. She seemed distressed, but he understood the king's reasoning. These people needed proof. Words alone would never be enough. What kind of trial? He asked. The trial of worth, Admiral Sung said with satisfaction. An ancient Veltir tradition. A series of challenges testing skill, intelligence, and character. Few outsiders have ever attempted it. Fewer still have passed. It is designed for Veltir physiology, Nari said urgently. You would be at a severe disadvantage. Then I'll have to work around that, Jiho said. I accept. The trial began the next day. Jiho stood in a massive arena, surrounded by thousands of Veltir spectators. The first challenge was physical. He had to navigate an obstacle course designed to test strength, speed, and agility. Jiho watched the Veltir competitors go first. They were incredible, leaping across gaps that seemed impossible and climbing walls with ease. When his turn came, the crowd fell silent with anticipation. Jiho could not match their physical abilities. But he did not try to. Instead, he studied the course and found alternate routes. Where others jumped, he used ropes. Where they climbed, he found handholds they had overlooked. He finished slowly, but he finished. The second challenge was tactical. Competitors had to solve a complex military scenario with limited resources. Most Velthir approached it by maximizing their forces and attacking directly. Jiho looked at the scenario differently. He saw opportunities for deception and misdirection. His solution avoided direct combat entirely, using the environment and false information to achieve victory without losses. The judges were surprised. It was not the traditional answer, but it worked. The third challenge tested technical knowledge. Competitors had to repair a damaged piece of equipment under time pressure. Jiho had never seen this particular technology before, but he approached it methodically, identifying the problem and finding a solution. By the fourth day, something had changed in the arena. The crowd had stopped looking at Jiho with contempt. They watched with curiosity instead. This human was not winning by Velthir standards, but he was finding ways to succeed anyway. The final challenge arrived. It was called the choice. Each competitor faced a scenario where they had to decide between personal gain and helping others. There was no right answer, only a revelation of character. The scenario placed Jiho in a damaged ship with limited life support. He could escape safely in an escape pod, but there were injured crew members who would die if left behind. Saving them would mean risking his own life. Every Velthir competitor before him had chosen to escape. They explained that a warrior's first duty was survival. They could not help others if they were dead. It was logical, practical, the smart choice. Jiho did not even hesitate. He immediately began working to save the injured crew members, completely ignoring the escape pod. He rigged life support extensions, stabilized the wounded, and found a way to signal for rescue. The simulation ended. Jiho stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard. The crowd was completely silent. Then King Day stood up. He began to clap. Slowly at first, then louder. One by one, the entire arena joined him. Thousands of Velthir applauding a human who had just shown them something they had forgotten. That caring for others was not weakness. That sacrifice for those in need was not foolishness. That strength came in many forms. Admiral Sung approached Jiho after the trial. The old warrior's expression had changed completely. "I was wrong about you," he said simply. "You have taught me something today. Something I should have known already." Jiho shook his hand. "Thank you, Admiral." That evening, King Day summoned Jiho to a private audience. Nari was there too. The king looked at Jiho with new eyes. "You did not win the trial by our standards," the king said, "but you won something more important. You showed us what we have lost. In building an empire of warriors, we forgot how to be compassionate. In pursuing strength, we abandoned wisdom." He placed a hand on Jiho's shoulder. "My daughter was right about you, and about humanity. You are remarkable not despite your limitations, but because of how you overcome them." Jiho felt tears in his eyes. "I just did what felt right." "Exactly," King Day said with a smile. "And perhaps that is the greatest wisdom of all." 3 months later, Jiho stood in the royal garden watching the sunset over the Velthir capital. The sky turned shades of purple and gold unlike anything Earth ever produced. After all this time, he still found the beauty of this world breathtaking. Footsteps approached behind him. He knew without looking that it was Nari. "Still not tired of that view?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. "Never," Jiho replied. "Though I have to admit I sometimes miss my little station." "It was simpler there," Nari smiled. "Simpler, maybe, but also lonely. At least here you have people around you." It was true. Over the past months, Jiho had been welcomed into Velthir society in ways he never expected. King Day had offered him a position as a special advisor. Young Velthir warriors came to him for lessons in creative problem-solving. Engineers consulted with him on projects, curious about human approaches to design. At first, it had been overwhelming. But gradually, Jiho had found his place, not by trying to be Velthir, but by being exactly who he was, a human who saw things differently, who asked questions others did not think to ask, who approached problems from angles the Velthir had never considered. "My father wants to speak with you," Nari said. "He has something important to discuss." They walked together through the palace halls. Jiho had learned the routes now, no longer getting lost in the massive structure. Guards nodded respectfully as they passed. Once such respect would have seemed impossible. Now it felt natural. King Day waited in his private study rather than the formal throne room. It was a smaller, more comfortable space filled with books and star charts. The king gestured for them to sit. Jiho, I have been thinking a great deal about what you have taught us, the king began. About compassion and cooperation. About the strength that comes from helping others rather than dominating them. I only did what felt right, Your Majesty, Jiho said. That is precisely my point. For you, compassion is natural. It requires no thought or justification. But for us, it has become something we must relearn. The king leaned forward. This war with the Kormath has lasted too long. Both sides have lost too much. We fight because we always have, because we believe showing weakness is unacceptable. Jiho understood where this was going. You want to make peace. I want to try, King Day confirmed. But the Kormath are as proud as we are. They will not accept overtures from someone they see as an enemy. But perhaps they would listen to a neutral party? Someone who has no stake in our conflict but has earned respect from both sides. You want me to negotiate peace? Jiho asked, stunned. Not alone. Nari will accompany you along with a diplomatic team. But you would be the voice of reason. The human who showed us another way. The Kormath have heard of you by now. They know what you accomplished. They may be willing to listen. Jiho looked at Nari. She nodded encouragingly. You can do this. I know you can. I'm not a diplomat, Jiho protested. I'm just an engineer who got lucky. You are more than that, King Day said firmly. You are proof that different perspectives have value. That compassion is not weakness. That the ability to care about others, even your enemies, is the foundation of true civilization. The king stood and walked to the window. For too long, the Velthir have measured ourselves by our strength, our military might, our technological advancement. But what good is any of that if we lose the ability to see others as equals, to work together rather than compete? You reminded us of these truths, Jiho. Now help us share them with our enemies. Jiho took a deep breath. This was far beyond anything he had ever imagined doing. But then again, so had everything else that had happened since he found that crashed escape pod. I'll do it, he said. I'll try. The negotiations took place on a neutral space station. The Kormath delegation arrived first, heavily armed and suspicious. They were larger than the Velthir, with thick armor-like skin and multiple arms. They looked intimidating and aggressive. When Jiho entered the conference room with Nari and the Velthir team, the Kormath leader stared at him in confusion. This is the human? The leader asked in standard. The one who defeated our strike team? I am, Jiho confirmed. Though I didn't defeat anyone. I just convinced them to leave. The Kormath leader studied him carefully. Our soldiers reported facing a superior force with advanced tactics. But there was only you and the Velthir princess? Yes, we used the environment in some misdirection. Your soldiers were never in real danger. We just wanted them to leave without anyone getting hurt. Without anyone getting hurt. The leader repeated slowly. That is an unusual goal for a military engagement. Maybe it should be the usual goal, Jiho suggested. Fighting only creates more reasons to fight. Someone has to choose to stop. The negotiations lasted 3 days. It was difficult. Both sides had deep grievances and long memories. There were moments when talks nearly broke down completely, but Jiho kept bringing them back to simple questions. What did they want? Not what they thought they deserved, but what would actually make their people's lives better. What were they willing to give up to achieve that? How could both sides gain more from peace than from continuing the war? He did not speak with the authority of a diplomat or the knowledge of a politician. He spoke with the directness of someone who had no hidden agenda. He genuinely wanted both sides to find a better path forward. Slowly, the Kormath began to trust him. He was not trying to make them look weak or score political points. He was just trying to help, and that sincerity was more persuasive than any clever argument could have been. On the 3rd day, they reached an agreement. Not a perfect peace, but a ceasefire, a chance to stop the killing and explore whether coexistence was possible. Both sides would withdraw from contested territories. Trade would resume. Prisoner exchanges would begin. It was just a beginning. But it was more than either side had believed possible. As the Kormath delegation prepared to leave, their leader approached Jiho one last time. Your species is not strong, the leader said bluntly. You have no great weapons, no vast empire. But you have something we lack. You have not forgotten how to care about others. Everyone has that ability, Jiho replied. Sometimes we just forget to use it. Perhaps. But you reminded us. both the Velthir and the Kormath. That is worth more than all the weapons in the galaxy. 6 months later, Jiho stood once again in the royal garden, but this time he was not alone. Nari was beside him, along with several other friends he had made during his time on the Velthir homeworld. Humans had begun visiting the planet more regularly. Trade agreements were being negotiated. Cultural exchanges were planned. The galaxy was beginning to see humanity in a new light, not as weak or insignificant, but as something valuable in different ways. Humans brought fresh perspectives, creative solutions, and a natural inclination toward cooperation that more aggressive species had lost. King Day had officially declared humanity allies of the Velthir Empire. More importantly, he had changed how his people thought about strength. Military power was still important, but compassion, creativity, and cooperation were now valued equally. "Do you ever regret it?" Nari asked. "Coming here? Your life would have been simpler if you had just sent me home and stayed on your station." Jiho thought about that. He thought about the quiet loneliness of his station, about the simple routine of his old life. Then he looked around at the friends he had made, the changes he had helped create, and the new possibilities opening up for humanity. "No," he said honestly, "I don't regret it at all. Sometimes the best things happen when we choose to help someone, even when it would be easier not to." Nari smiled. "My father wants to offer you citizenship, make you an official member of the Velthir Empire. You could stay here permanently if you wanted. That's very generous, but I think I should go back to Earth eventually. There are a lot of humans who need to hear about all this, about how we're not as insignificant as we thought, about how sometimes our way of doing things has value even if it's different." "You're going to inspire them," Nari said. "Show them that humans have something unique to offer the galaxy." "Maybe," Jiho replied. "Or maybe I'll just tell them that caring about others is never a waste of time, that helping someone in need is always worth it, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply choose to be kind." The sun set completely and the stars came out. Jiho looked up at them, thinking about all the worlds out there, all the species with their own strengths and weaknesses, all the possibilities for cooperation rather than conflict. He was just one person, just a human engineer who had stumbled into something much bigger than himself. But he had learned an important truth. You did not need to be the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced to make a difference. You just needed to care, to try, to believe that helping others mattered, and sometimes that was more than enough. Somewhere across the galaxy, on a small blue planet called Earth, humanity went about its daily life. Most had no idea that one of their own had helped change how the galaxy saw them, that a salvager named Jiho had shown ancient empires that compassion was strength, that cooperation was survival, but they would learn. Soon humanity would step onto the galactic stage not as conquerors or victims but as partners, as beings who brought something unique and precious to the cosmic community.